Hello, I'm Haruka. Today, we're going to be exploring the art of Japanese illustrator and mangaka Yana Toboso. The goal is to learn the secrets of designing a character that leaves an impression on the viewer and sticks in their memories. As creators, we all want our audience to connect with our characters and care about their story. However, a good design is integral to hooking a viewer and making them interested to learn more. A good design will also tell the viewer about your character's personality and habits, and be easily differentiable from other characters that may be similar. By studying master character designer Yana Toboso, whose characters have stood the test of time and have captivated fans for nearly 2 decades, we can learn how to make a strong impression with our own designs as well. Yana Toboso, currently 41 years old, was born on January 24th in Warabi, Saitama Prefecture. She made her manga debut in 2003 when she entered a manga competition with a short story idea named Hell O. In 2005, she made her publishing debut in G Fantasy magazine with her first manga Rust Blaster. Rust Blaster ran until 2006 and only lasted 1 volume. After completing Rust Blaster, she began her most well-known work, Black Butler, which is still serialized monthly in G Fantasy to this day. Before Black Butler, Yana has also used the pen names Yana Rock and Takaragi Yana. Her career has only taken her upwards in the nearly 2 decades since Black Butler began serialization, and has not only continued drawing Black Butler, but has also appeared as a guest character designer on projects like Touken Ranbu as well. Starting in 2019, she became the creative head of Disney's mobile game project Twisted Wonderland, which she now writes and illustrates for alongside Black Butler. Yana's art and characters have not only persisted in relevancy for the better half of 2 decades, but her influence has shaped Japanese art and fashion culture substantially. Yana Toboso's unique take on the Gothic Lolita and Visual Kei subcultures that influence entire fashion styles, and her concept of dark and gothic beauty is still emulated to this day. Black Butler's protagonist, Ciel Phantom Hive, is one of the most famous muses for the OG Kodana fashion style among many others, and Yana Toboso's characters have consistently been popular in the cosplay community as well. But in a sea of anime, manga, and light novels, how has Yana's design stayed timeless? I hope to dive deep into this study as we learn together how to design interesting characters that will resonate with your audience. The first resource I have is Yana Toboso's 4th Black Butler illustration collection. This book features promotional art, sketches, paintings, and manga panels relating to Black Butler and its characters. The 2-page spreads in particular are mesmerizing, exuding elegance and gothic style. One of the first things you may notice is a very pronounced and consistent art style. The concept of an art style is quite contentious, and talking about it in depth would warrant its own video. However, an art style can be summarized as an artist's individual way of representing and stylizing different concepts. This can be most easily observed in how she draws the face, following a consistent structure for how the facial features are drawn and spaced. This hasn't always been the case, as when Black Butler began serialization, she was still developing her own style, so early chapters were less visually consistent. Our first point of study will be the classic silhouette test. This is the principle that effective character design should still be recognizable from only its outline, or silhouette. I'm taking some of the full-body character pieces that stick out to me and using a stick of charcoal and tracing paper to trace the silhouette of the character. Besides just the outline of the character, I'm also highlighting some lines within the silhouette that have high contrast and value to better understand the pose from afar. The principles of a silhouette doesn't just have to apply to the character's imaginary shadow. Any point where there is a sharp contrast between light and dark values can be easily identified from afar and can define a character's pose. There are 2 key consistencies between all of these silhouettes I've traced that I would like to call attention to. The first thing is that Yana-san likes to add long, flowy pieces of fabric to her character designs, whether that be a scarf, cape, bustle, or any other article of clothing. I've marked this aspect in green. Within her full-body illustrations, these long pieces of fabric complement and run in tandem to the character's line of action. If you've watched my last video, this should be a familiar concept, but to recap, the line of action is a dynamic curve that a character's motion follows to convey movement and expression. The second notable aspect is smaller details such as ribbons or ties that run in direct contrast to the character's line of action. This aspect is marked in red. While in size these details are small, they make a very significant impact on the character's silhouette without obscuring the forms of the character. Let's use this beautiful full body of illustration of Ciel that I marked out the silhouette of as an example. He's striking a dramatic pose with a very strong S-curve, and wearing a dramatic bustle that follows his body's motion. You can also see 2 ribbon details in a crop that he's holding that flow in stark opposite directions to his pose. Put together, this creates a silhouette that not only shows us the character's pose, but also context as to which direction they're moving, or which direction the wind is blowing. The pose here is also very reminiscent of Kinako-san, so I wonder if they take inspiration from each other's artwork? The second point of study will be a more basic face shape exercise. As mentioned earlier, her characters have a very consistent and well-proportioned face shape that can clue us into their age and personality. Alongside full-body illustrations, this book also generously provides more close-up portrait shots of her characters. Here, I'm tracing over the faces of Ciel, Sebastian, and Snake. These 3 characters I feel best embody the 3 main face archetypes of Yana's style, which I can really only explain as the Shora to Bishonen to Ikemen scale. To explain what any of that means, it's essentially the change between the aesthetic and perceived age of a character. Shora style is supposed to be cute and youthful, Bishonen style is supposed to be soft and beautiful, and Ikemen style is supposed to be mature and sexy. One key difference between these 3 styles I'd like to point out is the distance from the top of the character's cheek to their jawline. As their characters become more mature, the length of their face increases accordingly. The third point of study actually calls for our second study material, the Twisted Archives from Disney's Twisted Wonderland. While the majority of this book is a very in-depth game guide, the end of the book actually features Yana Toboso's own concept art and sketches for the characters. The part I'm most interested in is the face gallery, where she showcases a multitude of each character's expressions. I'm going to go through and trace over some of these faces and heavily simplify them. My particular goal with this exercise is actually to study the eyes of her characters, specifically the eyebrows. I've always been a fan of how Yana-san conveys emotions on her characters' faces, so I want to take a closer look at the shape and angle of the eyebrows. I'm also using the Twisted Archives to study her side profiles. As you can see, her younger characters have large foreheads and less defined nose bridges. However, the mature character faces have shorter foreheads, more prominent noses, and of course a longer face shape. This is something that is important to keep in mind so that you can draw her characters from any angle. Now it's time for our digital study. Let's finally put all that we've learned into practice. I'm going to try and design my own Yana Toboso inspired character using all of the techniques we've studied so far. I'm going to use a random personality trait generator to generate 3 personality traits. However, I'm not going to tell you what these traits are until after I'm done with the drawing. Let's see if you can guess some of this character's personality traits purely based on their design. I'm going to start with making a pose for the character and building the silhouette out from there. I'm essentially making things up as I go, and trying to zoom out to see the bigger picture as often as I can. For this design, I went for a mix between Shinto and Kitsune design influences for this character. I recently watched the new Mononoke movie, which was definitely the biggest influence on this character design. The base silhouette for the character has a pretty standard fighter style look, but the shaggy hair and braid make him look more eccentric. To make the silhouette more robust, I added a rope design element on the waist, with the 3 tassels meant to represent the 3 tails of a kitsune. As for colors, I went for a very simple palette, but added a pop of dark purple to make the design less monotonous. Besides the purple accent on the boots and hair, I also added red face paint and tattoos to the character to give him a more supernatural feel. I used popular motifs such as beads to symbolize strength and a small shinobi-like blade. I also think the black bodysuit underneath adds sleekness to the character to contrast the traditional design elements. Altogether, I feel like I was able to create a charming and intriguing character even though I came into this with a blank slate. Although, near the end, I spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to clarify the eyebrow position, and eventually settled on a bit of an open-ended and ambiguous facial expression for the character. Now the question is, can you guess what this character's personality is like? I'll give you a second to think. You ready now? I was given the traits of spontaneous, sly, and manipulative for this character. To represent spontaneous and carefree nature, I gave him a very open pose and loosely worn clothing so he didn't look too uptight. As a representation of being sly and manipulative, I chose the kitsune as a motif since they are known to be tricksters who specialize in deceiving people. That's also why I drew such an ambiguous expression, to symbolize a character you can never really discern the true intentions of. As a whole, I feel like I created a very endearing yet slightly menacing character who looks like a strong and diligent fighter. And now, I want your input. If you have any ideas for a story for this character, leave it in the comments. I would love to hear all of your ideas. Now, let's wrap it all up with a review. By looking more closely into Yana-san's different illustrations, I was able to find new ways to depict my characters and make them interesting to the viewer. Not only did studying Yana-san bring insight into character design, but also art fundamentals such as shape and proportion. With this newfound knowledge, I hope that I, and you by extension, can upgrade your designs and give them a Yana-style flair. If there's really anything to be learned from the work of Yana Toboso, it's not to give up and to keep honing your skills. Even as we as artists get better and better, it's important to remember that there's always more to learn. Congrats, you made it to the end! This video has actually been a year in the making, which you might be able to tell since the Mononoke movie had just come out when I had written the script. In the time since, I've actually drawn this character again and given him a name, Urashima. I've grown quite attached to him, so if you guys could help me make a story for him in the comments, that would be wonderful. Even though my upload schedule has been slow, I already have another artist in mind for the next video in the series, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay in the loop. Also, on that note, if you have any requests for artists or topics you would like me to cover, leave a comment for that too. Anyways, I have an Instagram where I post my art a bit more frequently, and an Etsy where you can currently buy some of my works. I plan to add more selections to my shop, so stay notified for that. Thank you guys for watching and supporting me thus far. Your support means everything. That's it for today, guys. Mata ne!